What terrifying secret has someone told you while intoxicated? Story 1. I was at a bar one night in an affluent town when an older man next to me started talking about his sailing days. He had a 60-foot sailboat and used to travel all over North and South America. His story took place in the mid-1980s. He said that one night he was anchored near an island off the coast of Venezuela. He was with his girlfriend and they had just fallen asleep when he heard a bump. At first, he didn't think much of it, barely noticed it, but decided to check it out. He left the sleeping berth, and like in most sailboats, there was a set of steep stairs leading from the cabin to the aft deck. He said he always kept a pistol holstered and hanging from the side of the stair rail. As an afterthought, he grabbed it while climbing the stairs. When he was about halfway onto the deck, he saw a man coming over the railing, armed with an automatic weapon, possibly an AR-15 or something similar. He reacted immediately, firing 2 rounds into the intruder, who fell back over the railing. Rushing over, he looked down and saw that the man had landed in another boat, where there was a second armed individual. Without hesitation, he fired at the second man, hitting him multiple times. Realizing the danger, he quickly pulled up anchor and got out of there. He explained that pirate activity in that area wasn't uncommon. People like them would board boats, tie up the passengers, and steal everything. Then they would set the boat on fire, with the victims still on board. The bump he had heard earlier was the other boat pulling up alongside his. That was the last time he ever visited South America. Story 2. A few years ago, my dad came to me while he was a bit tipsy and tried to talk to me about my depression. Back then, it was something new to us, and it was a struggle to open up about it. Out of nowhere, he started sobbing. Keep in mind, I had never seen my dad cry before. He told me that he and my mom met while she was a dancer, and he was a bartender at the same club. He admitted that he always regretted where they came from. They had also struggled with substance abuse before my mom got pregnant with me. He said he wished he could take my pain away and deal with it himself because he knew how it felt. He went on about how desperate he had been to make sure our family was financially stable and happy, and how he would have done anything to take my depression away. Before that moment, I had only ever seen him as a slightly annoying dad and never really bonded with him. But after that day, I took the time to really get to know him as more than just my father. Now he's my best friend. In a way, him being tipsy that afternoon and opening up to me is the reason I have such a healthy relationship with him today. Story 3. During my freshman year of college, among all the new friends I made, there was one guy who was always the goofball of the group. Very laid back, casual, always up for anything. The biggest red flag we noticed about him was that whenever people were drinking and hanging out, he would always end up completely blacked out. He drank way too much and would stumble around like a rag doll, barely able to function. One night, after a party had wound down, a few of us, also intoxicated, asked him why he always drank so excessively. Slurring his words and barely able to keep his head up, he told us something that left us speechless. A few months earlier, during the summer before college, his best friend had called him. They lived in a small beach town, and his friend asked him to meet up to watch the sunset by the water. Thinking nothing of it, he biked over, sat down, and they talked for a while. Everything seemed completely normal until his friend suddenly pulled out a pistol and, without warning, shot himself in the head. He died instantly. My friend had to call the police while covered in blood, completely in shock, with fragments of bone and brain all over him. And just weeks later, still in disbelief, he left for college in another state, unable to sleep, focus, or process what had happened. He never remembered telling us that story, and none of us ever wanted to bring it up. His drinking habits didn't change until senior year when he finally started going to therapy. After graduation, he landed a job, and from what I've seen in the years since, he seems to be doing better. Story 4. This story wasn't told to me by someone who was drunk, but I think it fits here. I volunteer at a nursing home, and when one of the female residents was close to passing away, she confided something in me that had clearly weighed on her for decades. Years ago, her husband had an affair with their neighbor's wife. When the neighbor's husband found out, he was furious and wanted revenge. He was ready to physically harm her husband, but instead, they made an arrangement, one that was deeply disturbing. The neighbor agreed not to hurt him if he could, in his words, return the favor. To save himself from a beating, her husband agreed to the deal. She was horrified but had no say in the matter. The betrayal ran deeper than just infidelity. She was treated like nothing more than a bargaining chip. It got worse. Later, she became pregnant. She told her husband for the rest of his life that the child was his, but in her heart, she always believed it belonged to the neighbor. She carried that secret with her for her entire life, weighed down by both the deception and the way she had been treated. It was one of the most heartbreaking conversations I have ever had. Story 5. 2 years ago at Thanksgiving, my brother got terribly drunk, probably 7 or 8 Sam Adams. At first he was fine, but then he suddenly started sobbing. I was the one who comforted him for what felt like several minutes. Through his tears, he confided in me about his struggles with suicidal thoughts. He talked about how he often felt upset when he saw his friends in happy relationships. Not because he was jealous in a bitter way, but because he wished he could have that kind of happiness too. He told me that the only reason he hadn't gone through with it was because he didn't want to leave me alone. That conversation became the turning point where I was finally able to convince him to start taking antidepressants. Then out of nowhere, he brought up something from when we were about 6 years old. He had put gum in my hair and we had to cut it off. He was absolutely sobbing over it, calling himself a terrible brother and saying I didn't deserve him. I didn't even remember that happening, and honestly, I ended up with short hair anyway, so it never really mattered to me. He's doing so much better now and hasn't gotten that drunk again since. I love my brother, man. I think I'm gonna go give him a hug. Story 6. This happened about 6 months ago. My brother and I were drinking one night because it was the weekend, and we just wanted to have a good time, play some video games, and unwind. We had taken plenty of shots and were definitely way past our limit. We were playing some old World at War zombies for nostalgia, having fun when we paused the game to grab some snacks. As I was reaching for the salsa, he suddenly told me that about a month before, he had attempted to take his own life. He had overdosed on pills, and they had to pump his stomach. The whole time, he said, all he could think about was me, how devastated I would be if he didn't make it, and how he never wanted to leave me behind. I sat there for a moment, and then I told him something I had never admitted before. I had tried to do the same thing once, and the only thing that stopped me was thinking about him. We sat there for a while, talking about everything under the sun, just opening up in a way we never had before. After that night, we made a promise to each other. We've talked every single day since, and we never plan to miss a day. We're both doing a lot better now, and we're both in therapy. It's nice to have someone you can truly trust with things like this. Story 7. My great-grandfather served in World War II. He never talked about it. If you asked him about his time in the war, he would politely get up, grab his drink, and leave the room. After my first deployment to Afghanistan, he called me and said, I can finally talk to someone. That's when we started spending a lot of time together. I would tell him my stories, and in return, he finally started sharing some of his own. One night, while I was on leave, we sat down together and started drinking, going shot for shot. After a while, he told me something that had haunted him for the rest of his life. During the war, his unit came across a small concentration camp. Not all of them were as massive as Auschwitz, he explained. The first thing he remembered was the smell. It was so overpowering that he nearly threw up multiple times. Unlike the larger camps, this one didn't have gas chambers or ovens. Instead, on the northern side of the camp, there was a massive pit filled with thousands of decaying bodies. He was certain that the ones at the bottom had already turned to skeletons. When they spoke to the survivors, they learned that the Nazis had executed people at random, lining them up and shooting them so their bodies would fall straight into the pit. Many prisoners had been so starved and weak that some had thrown themselves in, hoping to break their necks on impact and end their suffering. By the time his unit arrived, the Nazis had already abandoned the camp. They had locked the gates, taken or poisoned the remaining food, and thrown dead bodies into the water supply. The disease and infection were so severe that some soldiers in his unit were afraid to even get close. He told me that, out of everything he had seen and done in the war, that was the worst. It tore him apart. The nightmares of those suffering people followed him for the rest of his life. He felt like he had never done enough. Like every time they failed to push forward, it was just another day or week that those prisoners had to endure more torture. My great-grandfather was proud of his service, and he lived a full life. He passed away in 2011, peacefully, at home in his bed, watching his favorite show. Story 8. Back in college, my ex once told me something while he was completely blackout drunk. A few years prior, he and a group of other kids had broken into a house to throw a party. The family who lived there was away on vacation or something. I don't know how they picked the house or how they knew it would be empty. It's been over 12 years and I've forgotten some details. At first they were just drinking, but at some point someone decided it would be fun to break a picture on the wall. Then someone else did the same. Before long, the whole group devolved into full-blown destruction. They shattered every window, broke the legs off chairs, and used them to smash holes in the walls. They tore apart and stole clothing, ripped or burned all the family photos, completely trashed the place. I don't even remember all the things he listed that they destroyed, but I do remember him sobbing, saying they had ruined those people's lives and that there was no way to make it right. Honestly, I don't think he even remembered telling me, because we never spoke about it again. Anyway, about 2 years later, he punched me in the face for asking for a ride to work one too many times. So I guess he was just a terrible person, regardless of his circumstances or alcohol intake. Story 9. On my birthday, I got really wasted drinking at home with friends and accidentally let slip the most devastating memory from my time in the military, the one that is the true source of my PTSD. While in Afghanistan, my unit stumbled upon a stray herd of goats in an area where we regularly met with an informant we knew to be a shepherd. Not far from the herd, we found a mass grave containing 17 decaying bodies. It was his entire nomadic clan. The assumption was that the Taliban had discovered his role as an informant and executed the whole group, leaving them there to rot. I spent the better part of a week burying the bodies. Some had been decapitated, including a child. I think my friends had been arguing about the conflict in Ukraine, and in my drunken state, I just snapped. None of them had ever seen the true horror of war. To them, all of it was just another headline. Edit. Since this post gained some attention, I want to add some context and also thank everyone for their kind words. I was 19 when this happened, and it became the moment that fundamentally changed my worldview. It's the reason I decided not to renew my enlistment. I understand that the conflict in Ukraine is different from the war in Afghanistan, but at that moment, I was drunk and frustrated. I've always resented how so many people can sit comfortably on the sidelines, advocating for war without ever having to witness its true cost firsthand. I found out later, after the deployment, when I was back in Germany, that the way we buried those bodies was completely inconsistent with Islamic and Pashtun burial traditions. I couldn't have known that at the time, but I have a strong suspicion that this entire event was never made public to the Afghan people, likely to avoid scrutiny over U.S. involvement and questions about the informant network. To this day, I carry deep personal regrets. Part of my job was coordinating intelligence requests, and sometimes that required using informants. The thing is, how that information was obtained wasn't always considered need to know for me. There's a very real possibility that, while I was sitting at a desk compiling bullet points for a PowerPoint presentation, I had unknowingly set off a chain of events that led to the gruesome deaths of innocent people. Story 10. My parents finally admitted that they had another child, one who died before my twin sister and I were born. The fact that they lost a child wasn't what made this terrifying. Tragic, yes, but unfortunately, that kind of thing happens. What was terrifying was the fact that my sister and I already knew. And for our entire lives, our parents convinced us we were imagining it. I have no idea how we knew. Our brother died a year before we were born. We never met him. There were no pictures, no mentions of him. The entire family completely erased him from existence. This was totally in line with how they handled things. They would simply forget anything they didn't want to acknowledge. And yet, from a very young age, my sister and I knew we had an older brother. We told everyone. Our school friends all knew we had an older brother, and when it was finally revealed that it had always been just the two of us, they gave us hell for lying. But we weren't lying. We were just confused because we knew it was true. Over the years, we confronted our parents multiple times. Every single time, they denied it. They swore up and down that we had never had another sibling. Then one night, when they were both drunk, we overheard them talking about him. We ran into the room, called them out on it, and they finally confessed. That still doesn't explain how we knew. I can only assume that when we were very young, we must have overheard something or seen something that we don't consciously remember. But the worst part? Even after all that, my sister and I still think they're lying. Both of us have a very clear memory of playing with a slightly older boy when we were very little. We both remember thinking of him as our older brother. Within that memory, it just feels real. And that's the most terrifying part of all. Story 11. I was at a bachelor party with a friend from high school and some other guys we had grown up with, but I wouldn't exactly call them friends. One of them had always been a loudmouth, always acting tough. Right after high school, he joined the Marine Corps. I'll refer to him as a faux F, friend of a friend. He had done 2 tours in Afghanistan and was supposed to be going back for a third, but instead he was stateside, hanging around for the party. After a long night of drinking and gambling, he started telling us a story, one he clearly thought was funny. He talked about how, in some remote Afghan province, there was a tribe known for trafficking young boys. He claimed that, in response, he and his unit used to shoot their livestock for target practice. Then in a completely casual tone, he added, "And sometimes there are stray bullets." Later, I found out what that really meant. It turns out that he and his convoy had actually opened fire on villagers, killing multiple people. The reason he never went back for his third deployment was because he and his unit were court-martialed and dishonorably discharged, but they never faced any additional punishment for killing civilians. Apparently, he had personally shot a child and justified it by saying the child was wearing a Suic vest. That claim was later proven to be false. He is now a police officer. In the last 6 years, he has shot and killed 3 people while on duty. Each time, the cases were ruled self-defense, despite what many considered to be strong evidence to the contrary. Story 12. Sometime right after Y2K, I went out drinking with some coworkers after work. One of them, a cop we all liked, started joking about how he regularly shook down a well-known group of drug-addicted transients. He laughed as he explained how he would take their belongings, confiscate their alcohol, just completely mess with them for fun. He actually thought this was funny. His justification: these people were criminals, always stealing and dealing, so he believed he was doing a society a favor. I had never encountered a dirty cop in my life before that night, and hearing that gave me immediate anxiety. The following Monday, I went looking for the group of transients he had talked about. I showed them pictures of him, got their statements, and proceeded to file for a warrant. Long story short, the cop was arrested as soon as he showed up for work. He lost his job and faced legal consequences. I was immediately cast out by a small group of coworkers, but the vast majority of them supported me. They understood that there should be zero tolerance for corrupt law enforcement. I have absolutely no regrets. Story 13. I wouldn't say he was drunk, but after a couple of beers, my late grandfather told me something that changed the way I saw him forever. As kids, my siblings and I always noticed that he had this little tick, a twitch whenever someone touched the back of his neck. We used to sneak up on him, tap him there, and watch him flinch. He would always laugh and say something like, "You better watch it," while we giggled, never thinking much of it. In my teens, I stayed with my grandparents for the summer while visiting family. One evening, after a couple of drinks, I finally asked him why he always had that reaction. That's when he told me about Vietnam. He and some of his unit had been captured. More than once, his captors put a gun to the back of his head, while marching them around, even while waking them up from sleep. Ever since then, if anything touched his neck, his body instinctively reacted. I felt horrible. I apologized over and over, but he just shrugged it off, saying we never meant any harm. Still, after that night, I never touched his neck again. Thinking about how many memories that simple touch must have triggered for him, god damn, it gave me a whole new level of respect for what veterans go through. Story 14. I don't know if this is genuinely terrifying, but it deeply unsettled me when it happened. This was over 6 years ago. I was renting a house with 3 other guys, friends I trusted enough to live with. We had parties fairly often. Over time, we started noticing that things were going missing. None of us ever turned on each other. We all figured it had to be some random people from the parties and just moved on. Eventually, we all went our separate ways, but we're still friends. Years later, I was at a bar and ran into an old high school classmate. Our school was small, so we all pretty much knew each other. This guy, who was in the police academy at the time, was hammered and started bragging about all the messed up things he had done. He thought it was funny that he was about to become a cop. Then he told me how he and a friend used to go to house parties and pull a little con. One of them would do card tricks and sleight of hand tricks to get the party's attention, while the other would quietly go through the house and steal things. As soon as he said it, everything clicked. He and his friend had been at our house parties. They were there often. The other guy always had a backpack on. It was kind of his thing. It all made sense. I called him out on it, and he got uncomfortable, made some excuse, and left. I never did anything about it besides telling my old housemates. But what stuck with me was how casually he admitted to violating people's trust, people who had welcomed him into their home. The fact that he thought it was funny. He never became a cop for whatever reason. But that moment stuck with me. It changed the way I looked at people. It was a harsh lesson about trust, and it's one I'll never forget. Story 15. Working in physical therapy, I had a patient recovering from major surgery at a rehab facility. He was a middle-aged man who often did his exercise sessions with his wife. One morning, a different woman was in his room. It turned out to be his sister, visiting and wanting to watch his PT session. During the session, he was acting extremely loopy, probably from all the pain medication. Through the conversation, I gathered that his sister's husband was on his deathbed due to a sudden illness. Then out of nowhere, he told his sister and wife that he had something he really needed to get off his chest. Apparently, decades earlier, he had been married to another woman and gone through a divorce. His sister and the rest of the family had always believed it was due to unsolvable differences. But in reality, he had caught his brother-in-law, the man currently dying, having an affair with his then-wife. He had kept that secret for years, never told his sister, never confronted her husband, just let them live their lives as if nothing had happened. But now with the man on his deathbed, he suddenly decided to drop that bomb. His sister ran out of the facility, screaming and sobbing. He could have waited, let the guy pass, taken that secret to his grave. But instead, he just unleashed it out of nowhere. Story 16. My spouse and I were a little high when we started discussing internet safety for our kids. That's when he disclosed something from his early teenage years, something I had never heard before. Back in the early days of AOL message boards, yeah, we're dating ourselves here, LOL, he used to engage in role-playing chats with a woman online. Over time, she suggested they meet up. She drove out to see him, but when she arrived, she was visibly shocked to realize he was just a kid. She had assumed she had been talking to someone closer to her age, when in reality, she was easily in her mid-30s. They met in person, had an awkward conversation, and that was the end of it. Ironically, I had gone through something similar. When I was a teenager, I talked to someone online who had lied about his age. One day, he walked into my workplace, and I realized he was easily pushing 40, if not older. He tried convincing me that he had a baby face and other nonsense that set off every alarm bell in my head. I shut it down immediately, but looking back, things could have gone very wrong since no one even knew about it at the time. In hindsight, I'm glad we had that conversation and were able to be open about our past experiences. More importantly, it reinforced why we need to make sure our kids don't repeat the same mistakes. The internet back then was like the Wild West, and we want them to be forewarned about the potential dangers. Story 17. A close friend of mine used to live in Florida, but randomly moved all the way up to Wisconsin. He never talked much about why he left, why he stayed away from his friends and family, or why he never went back. Every now and then, he would mention that he couldn't go back, that he wasn't allowed to see his daughter, and that he had a criminal record. But he never went into detail. One night while drinking, he finally told me the truth. He used to deal drugs, he wouldn't specify what, and one night a group of men broke into his house. He owned a rifle and positioned himself in a back room. The thing he remembers most is seeing one of the men rolling in through a long, narrow window. He didn't hear it, just saw it. Without hesitation, he turned and shot the guy. Then a second man came in through the door in front of him. He shot him too. That's all he told me. He never explained what happened after that, never gave me any details. When I first met him, he gave me a fake name. To this day, whenever he meets new people, he still introduces himself using fake names. And honestly, I don't ask questions. Story 18. Over the holidays, I got drunk with a good friend I hadn't seen in a while. At some point in the night, he broke down and confessed something he had never told anyone before. He deeply regretted becoming a father. He has 3 young kids, and while he loves them, he feels trapped. He said being a father was the biggest mistake of his life, but at this point, he's in too deep to do anything about it. Every night, he secretly drinks himself to sleep because otherwise his thoughts consume him. He was crying the whole time, and I could tell how much pain he was in. I didn't know what to say, so I just let him talk. I've personally never wanted kids, have known this since I was 10 or 11, and I've always been open about it. That's why he felt safe telling me. He's terrified that if our other friends, who are all parents, found out, they'd judge and shun him. And honestly, he's probably right. Young parents can be extremely judgmental. I know this firsthand from how much flack they've given me for choosing to stay child-free. I never told anyone. It's not my business. The most baffling part is that, from the outside, you'd never know. He's an amazing father. His kids adore him. He's been with his girlfriend for over 10 years and they have a solid relationship. He does everything for his family. At first, I thought maybe he was just drunk and exaggerating, but no, he meant every word. He just knows how to hide it. I think the pandemic and the state of the world really messed things up for a lot of young parents, him included. Story 19. I used to know a Vietnam veteran who went by the name Soldier. He was a known drunk, loved crack and Jesus in equal measure. But he was a kind man. He would take out the trash for a few bucks, and over time, we got to know him well. Locals told us that even as a kid, something had always been off about Soldier. He wasn't quite right in the head and never should have been drafted. But when the war came, they sent him anyway. One day he was hanging out with us, drinking, playing beer pong, grilling, and smoking. He was having a great time, and we were enjoying his company and stories. Then he told us one we never forgot. He said he operated a tank. One day a sniper shot out the tracks, leaving them stranded. They had no choice but to evacuate. As he was getting out, he took a nasty graze to the shoulder and head. The next thing he knew, he was waking up in a Vietnamese village, wounded but being cared for. He said the villagers pleaded with him, "Go home, black man. This is not your war." They fed him, nursed him back to health, and treated him with kindness. Then one morning he woke up to the sound of helicopters and gunfire. The village was under attack by American soldiers. He said he tried to stop them, but he couldn't. So in an act of desperation, he picked up a rocket launcher and fired at his own helicopters to protect the only people who had ever been kind to him. That was the end of his military career. He was discharged and left to survive on his own. He couldn't read. One time he brought me a letter from the government about his benefits being held up. I was just a teenager, but even I could tell he had been waiting years for money that was never coming. I don't see him anymore, except in mugshots on the arrest pages. I don't know if he ever got his money, but I do know that every time we drank with him, he would get emotional. He always made sure everyone knew that he loved and appreciated them, and he would tell that story, and it never changed. Story 20. Several years ago, I went to a Halloween party. Later in the night, a group of about 20 people had gathered outside around a fire pit. Everyone was standing around, talking in smaller groups, as happens at parties. At some point, I went inside for about 10 minutes, and when I came back, the entire atmosphere had shifted. Instead of people chatting in small groups, nearly everyone had gone silent, listening to one very drunk guy telling a story. I didn't know him, and as I later found out, no one else at the party knew him either, except for his girlfriend, who had brought him along. So this guy, drunk out of his mind, was sharing a deeply personal story with a group of complete strangers. In the story, it was about the time he went on a family vacation to Europe as a teenager and was assaulted by a man. As he spoke, his emotions built, and it became clearer where the story was heading. His girlfriend kept trying to stop him, saying things like, "Are you sure you want to tell this now? And why don't you tell me the rest when we get home?" But he didn't stop. He finished the story in vivid detail. When he was done, he said something like, "I can't believe I actually got all that out. I've never told anyone." The whole ordeal was awkward, uncomfortable. I don't even know how to describe it. I felt terrible for him. I hate that he went through that, and I truly hope that getting it off his chest helped him in some way. But given how drunk he was, and the fact that this was his first time ever saying it out loud, I can't help but think that when he woke up the next morning, he was hit with an entirely new kind of trauma when he realized, or was reminded, that he had shared it with a group of strangers. I don't judge him at all for needing to talk about it. I just hope he was at peace with how he finally got it out. Story 21. One night, a friend called me, asking if he could crash at my place. When he showed up, I found out why. That evening, he and his wife had some neighbors over for drinks. At some point, his wife said she was going to grab cigarettes. She was gone longer than she should have been, and she wasn't answering her phone. Something didn't feel right, so he drove to the shopping center where the gas station was. That's where he found her. She was in a car having S with another man. He lost it. The cops were called, and in the end, they didn't arrest him, but instead dropped him off at my house, which was a solid 20-minute drive away in a different suburb. At the time, they had a young daughter, and since then, they've had a son. I thought for sure he would leave her, but he didn't. They stayed together. He made me swear never to tell anyone, and I kept that promise for 4 years. We have a big group of mutual friends, and I wasn't even his first call that night. He had asked other people before me. We weren't the closest in our group, but for whatever reason, I was the one who ended up knowing the truth. Since then, his drinking has gotten worse. Sometimes when he's drunk, he picks fights, including at a friend's wedding. And because I'm the only one who knows his secret, I've had to step in and help him keep it together. He told me that the only reason he's still in the marriage is because of the kids. That night at the wedding, I had to explain to everyone that he was just drunk and bringing up old arguments with his wife. A few months ago, another friend told me that he had recently gotten so drunk that he became completely unresponsive. His wife called this friend, asking him to come over. Instead, the friend told her to call an ambulance and rushed over. That's when the truth started unraveling. While he was barely conscious, he admitted to the friend that his wife had actually cheated on him 3 times. Not just the once that I knew about. One of those affairs had been a full-blown relationship with one of their friends while he was in LA starting a new job, and she stayed behind for a few months. This friend was shocked that I hadn't told my wife about it. He had already told his. So that night, I finally told mine. We still hang out with this couple regularly. I don't know if his wife realizes that I know about her infidelity, but the rest of our friend group has no clue. They just see him getting drunk and acting out, but they don't know why. And me? I still have to hold my tongue. I still have to pretend I don't think his wife is a terrible person. Story 22. A close friend of a friend had been drinking heavily at a music festival. We were coming down from an MDMA roll, and he was still clearly very intoxicated as we walked back to our Airbnb, trying to find the rest of our group. He was a Korean guy, and from the first time I met him, he had this habit of going on rants about how much he hated white women. At first, it seemed like he was just joking, complaining that they were all basic and fake. But over time, it got old, really old. It reached a point where, if someone had told me he had actually hurt someone, I wouldn't have had a hard time believing it. I'd even feel guilty for not reporting him earlier because deep down, I half expected it. That night, he was slurring his words and stumbling as we made our way through a crowd of festival goers. A young woman accidentally bumped into him. It was late, the festival had just ended, and people were everywhere. It was an innocent mistake. But before I could process what was happening, he turned around and cocked back his fist. I grabbed his arm before he could throw a punch. I started calming him down and he mumbled, "Man, I'd kill that stupid thing BH. White girls think they can do and say whatever they want." Then completely unprompted, he added, "I know I have a little duck. It's my dad's fault, and there's nothing I can do about it." I had no idea what to say. I just muttered, "Man, it's not so bad. You're a good guy." I didn't mean it. I never really liked him, but I had no clue how else to respond. Story 23. My paternal grandmother was never financially stable, but she was the most caring grandparent a kid could ever hope for. Growing up, my family was firmly middle class, so I didn't realize until later that she was constantly spending money she didn't have, all in an effort to spoil her 5 grandchildren. She made sure we had everything. Once a month, we had a baby's day out sleepover at her tiny house, something that lasted well into our teenage years. On our birthdays, she would pull us out of school and take us shopping, always coming home with new video games and enough candy to last a month. At Christmas, she gave the best gifts. She was also the primary caretaker for my aunt, who had Down syndrome. Both of them had health issues that should have warranted in-home nursing care at different points in their lives. But my grandmother made it work. I mention all of this because she played such a huge role in my happiness growing up. She was a bit of a hypochondriac, irresponsible with money, and had a tendency to guilt my dad into maintaining toxic family relationships, but I loved her fiercely. As I got older, my relationship with my nuclear family became strained, but hers never wavered. Even after I moved away for college, she was the one person I never hesitated to pick up the phone for. After undergrad, her health declined fast. I started taking as many long weekends as possible, making the long drive home to see her. I knew our time together was running out. On my second to last visit, it was clear she was heavily medicated. Her doctors had prescribed narcotics to ease her pain, but I didn't care. I sat with her for hours, just talking, listening to her sleepy, fleeting thoughts. When she got quiet, I started reminiscing about our sleepovers and all the ways she had spoiled us as kids. At one point, I half-jokingly asked, "Why did you do all that for us anyway?" Her expression changed. She got quiet, her voice barely above a whisper. Because my marriages cheated your father of a childhood. And then, for the first time in my life, she opened up about the darkest parts of our family history. She had been married 3 times. I knew some of the details. None of the men were good, but I had no idea just how bad things had been. My biological grandfather had been abusive, but it was husband number 2, my aunt's father, who was the absolute worst. He had severe substance abuse problems. Pills made him violent. She used to send him away on fake fishing trips just to protect the house and the children in it. One night he came home in a full-blown rage. He sped into the driveway, jumped out of his car, and started screaming. He threatened to kill everyone in the house, said he was going to throw their bodies over a nearby dam. Then he started walking toward the front porch. He was carrying a butcher's cleaver and a roll of cord. My grandmother and my uncle, who was barely 12 at the time, grabbed a 12-gauge shotgun and a .306 deer rifle. They shot him before he could make it inside. The police came, took the body, and that was it. I sat there completely speechless. It was one of the only times in my life when words completely failed me. Hearing about her trauma was one thing. Finding out that this saintly woman, the person who had given me some of the happiest moments of my childhood, had been driven to justifiable homicide, that shook me. I left shortly afterward, still trying to process it. A few weeks later, I made another trip to visit her. I never got the chance. I arrived to find EMS already there. My aunt had found her collapsed in the living room. By the time I got there, she was already in a body bag. That last conversation was the final real moment I ever had with her. The last words we ever shared outside of a few brief, love you, miss you voicemails. Story 24. A longtime friend of mine got pretty drunk after a really bad week. A lot of terrible things happened to him, plus he was facing the threat of a lawsuit over something absurd. He had injured a burglar during a home invasion, but he hadn't killed him. And yet, the burglar sued him. Welcome to the USA, right? Whoever makes the biggest scene wins. Anyway, he got wasted. He pulled out a .44 Magnum S&W 629 revolver, loaded a single cartridge into the cylinder, spun it, flicked his wrist, and pulled the hammer back. Then he said, "Do you know what happens when a .44 Magnum hits someone?" I told him, "No, but I'm sure it's nothing pretty." He pressed the gun against his head and pulled the trigger. Click, empty chamber. Then he gave me a strange look and smiled. He had known all along that it was empty. You can actually see if there's brass in the 10 o'clock chamber and use your thumb to nudge it when you flick your wrist to reload the cylinder back into the frame. It's just a sleight of hand trick so you always know the next chamber to fire is empty. But I could tell he was in a lot of pain. That's when he admitted the only reason he hadn't killed the intruder was because he had already done something like that in the past. Apparently about 6 years before that, so 16 years ago now, 3 guys followed him home. One of them tried to attack him, so he shot all 3. He lived way out in the middle of nowhere and had access to heavy machinery, so he buried the bodies and never filed a police report. He said the guilt had been eating him alive ever since. The next day when he sobered up, I asked him about his story. His eyes tensed and he said, "What story?" He refused to ever talk about it again. To this day, I don't know if it was the truth or just drunken rambling, but my gut tells me he wasn't lying. Story 25. I knew something was going on with my wife, so we took the kids to the local park and I suggested we have some drinks. She agreed, and at first it was fun. She loosened up, and that's when she told me, completely out of nowhere, that she needed other men and was sorry. She said we got married too young, and she felt the urge to be with random guys. Obviously, I didn't agree with that. That's when I found out she had been sleeping with someone else behind my back for months. She admitted she would leave work to be with him, even on days when the kids really missed her. Then she told me something that absolutely shattered me. There was a time she left work, went to see him, and came home still covered in what was left of him. That same night, she let me touch her before rushing to the bathroom, saying she had to pee. That's when I noticed it on my fingers. She showered, then let me be with her, without a clue of what had happened earlier. I didn't even realize what it was until that day at the park. Ever since then, I've been dealing with a horrible depression. It destroyed me. She broke my heart and she didn't even flinch. She's a textbook narcissist and sociopath. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If I told you everything, you wouldn't even believe it was real. Story 26. She didn't confess it to me directly, but I overheard my drunk mom tell her friends that she wished she had aborted me because I ruined her life. For some background, I was a well-behaved child and teenager, especially compared to my younger sister, who was the complete opposite, but who my parents worshiped, by the way. When my sister was little, she was selectively mute and had such severe anxiety that she was constantly covered in hives. Meanwhile, I had ADH, which my parents refused to acknowledge even existed. It wasn't treated until I finally did something about it as an adult. Anytime I even came close to acting out, I was immediately punished. I learned to mask my behavior at a young age, to the point that I didn't even realize I was doing it. If I ever showed signs of my ADHD around them, they would just call me stupid, say I was making it up, or ask what was wrong with me. My sister, on the other hand, went through years of extremely expensive therapy. She always got the best of everything: more money, more time, more attention. My parents devoted every weekend to her swim meets, and by default mine too, since they needed me there to watch their stuff. But they wouldn't even pay for one non-competitive dance class for me. When my sister went to college, she got a pastry arts degree, and my parents constantly praised her for being a 4.0 student. Meanwhile, I struggled to get 2 accounting degrees while dealing with an undiagnosed learning disability, and all I ever got was grief from them. My sister's teenage years were a nightmare. She had a constant bad attitude, threw clothes out of car windows so she wouldn't have to go into restaurants she didn't like, and even physically attacked me multiple times over trivial things. She tried to stab me with knives and forks when my parents weren't home. One time she yanked the steering wheel while I was driving, almost running us off the road, while her friend was in the car, just because I changed parking spots and she didn't check her phone when I texted her a picture of where I moved. I could go on. Everyone who meets my family immediately notices how much my parents favor her. Right now she's jobless, hasn't worked in 2 years, and doesn't plan to because she got her RN last year, but refuses to get vaccinated due to her and my parents' political beliefs. Yet they still brag about her getting her RN, even though she's done absolutely nothing with it. Meanwhile, I've added $12,000 to my salary, bought a car, bought a house, and spent the last 2 years keeping my husband from calling my sister out for what a terrible person she is. Even my parents admit my sister is the difficult one, and that I'm the good and nice one. And yet somehow, I'm still the bad guy in every story they tell. After everything I've been through, my self-confidence is completely destroyed. Nothing I ever did was good enough for them, and now as an adult, I struggle to form any kind of healthy relationship with authority figures. I don't even have kids, though I want them because I'm terrified of treating them the way I was treated. Story 27. This is somewhat related and still terrifies me to this day. Many years ago, my friends and I went camping and got extremely drunk. Out of the 10 to 12 of us, I don't think a single person was even remotely sober. I ended up sharing a tent with 2 brothers because their tent was big enough for a third person. At some point, we all passed out. In the middle of the night, I woke up to someone kissing my ear. I sleep on my stomach, so my ear was facing up. And there was definitely someone kissing it and whispering softly into it. I was still too drunk to process everything clearly, and I can't remember any of the words, but it was a man's voice. Unless some stranger snuck into our crowded tent to do something weird, it had to be one of the brothers. I remember just lying there, not reacting much and mumbling, "It's okay." I have no idea why I said that. It's like it was the only thing my brain could come up with. I just kept repeating, "It's okay, it's okay." Eventually, he stopped kissing my ear and whispering, then went to sleep. None of us have ever spoken about it, not once. I've never told any of my friends, any of my family, no one. You reading this are probably the first to ever know. But now I live with the knowledge that one of those 2 brothers is definitely not who he pretends to be, and whoever it was had crossed a serious line that night. Story 28. My dad was a U.S. Marine and fought in the Vietnam War. He had horrible PTSD, so he rarely spoke about his experiences, only with other vets, never with me, my mom, or my twin sister. One day we were watching a Vietnam War movie together. He struggled with war films but would still watch them occasionally. That night, he had a couple of beers, and there was a scene where American soldiers were engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the Viet Cong in the middle of the jungle. One soldier was forced to use his helmet as a weapon. Out of nowhere, my dad muttered, "When in doubt, use your helmet." He said it so casually, but I knew. by the look in his eyes, by the way he said it, that he had done exactly that in real life. He had killed a man with his helmet in combat. He fell completely silent after that. His eyes went distant, lost in the past. The thousand-yard stare. He wasn't watching the movie anymore. He was back in Vietnam. My dad passed away 4 years ago due to Agent Orange exposure. I know he's finally at peace now, but that war haunted him his entire life. He was only 18 when he was sent there. I can't even imagine the things he saw. He was a tunnel rat too, which is absolutely terrifying. Before he died, we went on an honor flight to DC, but we had to fight the VA to get them to acknowledge his Agent Orange exposure, even though it was what killed him. I was also born with kidney failure due to a birth defect from his exposure. Despite everything, my dad was my hero. I miss him more than anything, but at least now he's free from the war that never left him. Story 29. It wasn't so much a terrifying confession as it was a terrifying experience that came from a confession. My fiancé and I were staying at a motel while we looked for an apartment. There was a bar on the lower level beneath our floor. His best friend and his fiancée lived in the apartments next to the motel, and we would all hang out together frequently. One day while my fiancé was out, his friend came over, knocked on the door, and asked me to go to the bar with him. He said he didn't want to go alone because of his social anxiety. I wasn't planning on saying yes, but before I could even respond, he pushed the door open further and let himself into the room. Then he flopped onto the bed like he had no care in the world. At that moment, I could already tell he was at least buzzed. I felt extremely uncomfortable being alone in the room with him. I tend to be shy, and rather than confront the situation directly, I agreed to go, just to get out of there and be around other people. I was so flustered that I forgot my room key when we left. The door automatically locked behind us. As soon as we got to the bar, he started ordering drinks for me, even after I refused multiple times. He kept insisting, "Don't worry, I'll put them on," his fiancé's tab. Even though I never drank them, he kept ordering more. Then he started asking me personal questions, digging for problems in my relationship. That's when things got worse. He placed his hand on my leg and started saying things that made me deeply uncomfortable. Then he confessed that he had feelings for me. He told me things about his own relationship, basically unloading his personal problems onto me. He kept telling me not to tell my fiancé about any of this. I don't know why, but even though the bar had other people in it, I felt terrified. Thankfully, he eventually went to the bathroom. The moment he was out of sight, I ran straight to the motel office and begged for a new room key. The woman at the front desk gave me one immediately. I knew he would realize I was gone any second, so instead of going straight back to my room, I ran into the woods behind the motel. I called my fiancé right away, told him everything, and he told me to go back to the room, lock the door, and wait. He was already on his way. I made my way back to the motel, but as I walked down the long hallway to my room, I saw him. He had spotted me, and before I could even get the key into the door, he ran to cut me off. He started begging me not to leave, not to tell my fiancé, not to ruin everything. I told him I didn't want to hang out anymore. That's when he punched the wall, right next to my head. I rushed inside, slammed the door shut, and locked it. He stood outside for a few minutes before leaving. Moments later, my fiancé arrived. As I told him everything that happened, we suddenly saw the doorknob turn. Someone was trying to get in. My fiancé swung the door open, and there he was, his so-called best friend. The guy froze when he saw my fiancé home. My fiancé told him to leave, but instead he challenged him to a fight and kept shoving him backward. My fiancé slammed the door shut again and locked it. That's when the guy lost it. He headbutted the door so hard he broke it down. This guy was massive, easily 200 pounds heavier than my fiancé. They started brawling on the floor, punches flying, knocking into furniture. I was screaming. I ran back down to the bar to get help. The hotel owner, his son, and a friend all came running up. It took all three of them to hold this guy down. They had to sit on him just to keep him pinned. The cops and paramedics arrived. He was bleeding everywhere and proceeded to spit on the officers and medics. Then he started spewing absolute nonsense, saying I was his girlfriend. He was completely delusional. To this day, I am so grateful my fiancé came home when he did. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if he hadn't. Story 30. A friend of mine was at a work Christmas party when the new guy, who had only been on the job for less than 2 weeks, got completely wasted way too quickly. He was at the can't even walk properly level of drunk. At first, he told everyone who would listen that he was a recovering alcoholic, which given his state was clearly not going well. But that wasn't even the worst part. As he kept drinking, he started venting about how he had been screwed over by the law 10 years ago. All I did was fall in love, and I got prison time as thanks. Who are the police to decide that a man and woman can't be in a loving relationship? Yeah, except there was one small detail he conveniently left out at first. When he was 25, she was 14, meaning their relationship had likely started when she was around 12. Somehow he had forgotten to mention that little fact in his job application. That omission made it very easy to ensure he didn't make it to week 3 at that company. The cherry on top? He had also lied about his skills and was really bad at the job anyway. The best part? His replacement turned out to be near perfect in every way. My friend even took the new hire under her wing as a mentoring project, with plans to eventually have them take over her role in the future. So, all's well that ends well. Kinda. Story 31. A friend of mine was at a work Christmas party when the new guy, who had only been on the job for less than 2 weeks, got completely wasted way too quickly. He was at the can't even walk properly level of drunk. At first, he told everyone who would listen that he was a recovering alcoholic, which given his state was clearly not going well. But that wasn't even the worst part. As he kept drinking, he started venting about how he had been screwed over by the law 10 years ago. He kept saying, all I did was fall in love, and I got prison time as thanks. Who are the police to decide that a man and woman can't be in a loving relationship? Yeah, except there was one small detail he conveniently left out at first. When he was 25, she was 14, meaning their relationship had likely started when she was around 12. Somehow, he had forgotten to mention that little fact in his job application. That omission made it very easy to ensure he didn't make it to week 3 at that company. The cherry on top? He had also lied about his skills and was really bad at the job anyway. The best part? His replacement turned out to be near perfect in every way. My friend even took the new hire under her wing as a mentoring project, with plans to eventually have them take over her role in the future. So all's well that ends well? Kinda. Story 32. An acquaintance of mine, someone I always thought was dirt poor, once told me that he was actually a multimillionaire. He had embezzled money from a local company, but he couldn't spend a dime of it because he believed the cops and the IRS were watching him. He lived in a rundown apartment in Wichita, drove a rusted-out truck, and worked construction. His place was so empty it looked like Lenny's apartment from The Simpsons. Barely any furniture, just an empty shell of a living space. I always paid for the booze when we hung out. We'd sit on the floor, eat pizza, and play World of Warcraft. Then one night, he hit me with a confession I never saw coming. He told me that he had hidden the stolen money somewhere, but no one would ever find it. One of the last times we hung out, he swore me to secrecy. He made me promise I wouldn't tell anyone where his safe was. Then he told me where he had hidden the money, and then he laughed. People walk by it all the time, he said. I hid it under a geocache, right under their feet. No one will ever find it. Something about the way he said it felt off. His usual laid-back attitude had completely shifted. His paranoia was through the roof. A few weeks later, he vanished. No warning, no explanation. His apartment was completely empty. His truck was gone. His Facebook? Deleted. His phone? Disconnected. Even his Blizzard account, where we played WoW together, was shut down. Just poof. No police ever came knocking. No news reports. Nothing. So what did I do? I went looking for the cache. When I got to the out-of-the-way park he had described, I immediately knew something was wrong. The area where he said the money was hidden had been excavated, like someone had gone through with a full-on excavator. I froze. My stomach dropped. I quickly pretended to be looking for an actual geocache in case there were hidden cameras. Then I got the hell out of there. If by any chance you're reading this, Barry B. Gary, I didn't find your money. I have no idea where you went. And honestly, I don't want to know. Tori 33. 12 years ago, I was couch surfing my way through Japan and ended up in Nara, staying with a woman who had offered to host me. She wasn't Japanese. She was Indonesian, but had permanent residency in Japan. She was beautiful, charismatic, and incredibly intelligent. She owned a small dance studio, and that's where I slept, on a mat on the dance floor, which suited me fine since I was also a dancer at the time. The only thing that struck me as odd was that she seemed to have no friends. For the first couple of days, I had an amazing time sightseeing and hanging out with her. Then one night, we went out drinking, and as the sack flowed, her polished, friendly demeanor started to slip. She had told me earlier that she and her best friend had planned a vacation together in northern Japan, but he canceled last minute. She had been frustrated by his flakiness, saying, didn't he care about their friendship? What about me? I needed this vacation to relax, and he just bailed. She had painted herself as the victim, wronged by an inconsiderate friend. That night, after a few drinks, she elaborated. Her friend hadn't canceled on a whim. He had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing chemotherapy. He was exhausted, sick, and in pain, and she was furious with him. She scoffed as she spoke about him, calling him selfish for ruining her holiday plans. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. Sometimes I imagine I am the angel of death, she said. I'd come down and cover his mouth while he sleeps until he dies. I was speechless. First, because it hit me that I was sitting across from a complete sociopath, if not an outright psychopath. Second, because I had lost my best friend to cancer when she was young. I was furious. But it was the middle of the night. My backpack and all my belongings were still at her dance studio. I had no immediate place to go. So I forced myself to stay neutral, giving minimal responses, trying to act like I wasn't completely repulsed by her. I was supposed to stay another night and even take one of her dance classes. But the moment morning came, I grabbed my things and left. I wanted nothing to do with her ever again. Story 34. I was getting stoned with my granddad while he drank alongside it all. He was an incredibly intelligent and stoic man, someone I respected deeply. Halfway through the evening, as we swapped stories, he let something slip, something he quickly regretted. He started telling me about a time in his youth when he robbed a bank in London. Now here's the thing. My granddad had more than a few demons in his life. He wasn't dealt the best hand. He was a long-time alcoholic, and his body would bruise at the slightest touch. On the surface, he seemed like a poor man, but strangely enough, he never ran out of money. He would even overspend at times, which only made me believe his story more. Unfortunately, I didn't get much out of him. The first thing I stupidly asked was, what bank was it? The moment he processed my question, he shut down completely. He must have realized he was telling his grandson something he never should have admitted, and he dropped the subject entirely. He took it to the grave without ever confirming or denying it again. But there was something about the way he said it that stuck with me. It wasn't a drunken exaggeration or an old man's rambling. It was matter of fact. If anyone could rob a bank in London and get away with it, it was him. He was a smart man, a door-to-door salesman with a silver tongue, a sly fox when it came to business. He could talk his way into anything. And maybe, just maybe, he had talked his way out of something too. Story 35. I had been reading this thread for hours, thinking I had nothing to contribute, when suddenly a memory resurfaced. My dad, who is a borderline alcoholic, used to come home drunk pretty often, and sometimes he would tell me stories from his time working as a paramedic. He had been a paramedic for over 30 years, and one night, when I was about 13 years old, he came home drunk and found me sitting on the couch watching TV. That night, he shared some horrific stories with me, but this one was the worst. He and his partner were called to a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood not far from where we lived. It was late evening, the kind of night where the streetlights didn't quite reach the edges of the pavement, and everything felt eerily still. They pulled up to the address and noticed something unsettling. The front door was slightly open. His partner decided to check the back entrance while my dad went in through the front. As he walked through the house, moving from room to room, he found the 4 dead bodies of a young family. The mother and her 3 children lay lifeless in there.